Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's another day, it's another video. In this one, I'm going to be picking who I think is the best player at every Premier League club. Again, it's an early one. We could revisit later on in the season, but these are my initial thoughts. Again, the criteria is vibes. So that's what this will be based on. Before we get into it, if you're new here, please subscribe to my channel for daily videos, football silliness, comedy songs, sketches, you name it. There's something going on the channel. And drop a like on the video if you enjoy it. Comment below with your thoughts on this particular video. And join my Patreon to get behind-the-scenes access, early access to videos, and join the Discord club where we talk about football as well. So let's get into the video. My best player from every Premier League team, starting at Arsenal, and Bukayo Saka. Tough one to start off with. Lots of great players in there. Ødegaard with a great shout for potentially being best player. Really like Martinelli. I wouldn't say he's their best player, but I think he's absolutely fantastic. But for me, it's got to be Bukayo Saka. The kid's a leader already. You know, he's a big game player, and he's only 21. I mean, he's got an incredible head on his shoulders. Incredibly, I would say, mature head on young shoulders. Fantastic left foot. Scores goals for England. Scores goals for Arsenal. Is often their leader on the pitch, and he's just fantastic. I love Bukayo Saka. Nice lad. Beautiful smile. Someone I think we can all get behind, even if you're not an Arsenal fan and you want to see him do well. I think he'll be at the top of the game for at least another decade. So Bukayo Saka is who I think the best player is at Arsenal. Let's move on to Aston Villa, where I've gone for Ollie Watkins. Again, you know, some other potentials there. Emi Martinez, fantastic goalkeeper, one of the best in the Premier League, World Cup winner. Can't say that of many players at Aston Villa. In fact, I think he's the only one. Tyrone Mings is a brilliant defender. I like him a lot, very consistent. But I think Ollie Watkins has done so well since getting to Villa. A real leader up front, real talisman, scores a lot of goals, will be their main man going into Europe this summer as well, this season I should say. So I think Ollie Watkins is Villa's best player. I said that Jacob Ramsey was their most underrated player. I think he's brilliant too. But number one for me is Ollie Watkins. Let's move on to Bournemouth. And I think their best player is Philip Billing. Now, Solanke was definitely in the running here for their best player, but I think Billing is absolutely fantastic. Had a really good season last season for Bournemouth. Went through a spell scoring a lot of goals from midfield. He's tall, he's strong, got a good left foot, gets assists, gets goals. I think he's really instrumental to their team. I think if you take Solanke out of the team, I think they struggle for goals. But I think if you take Billing out of the team, they struggle for everything, really. Those are their two talismanic players. But Billing, for me, I think is the one that keeps things ticking over. Bournemouth fans, let me know in the comments. Am I wrong? I'm a big fan of Billing, but am I wrong? Is it Solanke? Let me know. But I think Billing is Bournemouth's best player currently. I appreciate we've got a month or so to go before the start of the season and some transfers to be made. But currently, for me, Philip Billing. Let's move on to Brentford. Now, tricky one, this, because normally I would say Ivan Toney, who is absolutely Brentford's talisman, but we're not going to see him for 5-6 months of the season. So I'm going to have to revise. You know, if I do this again later on in the season, it'll probably be Toney. But I'm going to revise that for who I think Brentford's best player is. And I'm going to go for Bryan Mbeumo. Will be filling Toney's shoes this season up front. I know he sometimes plays slightly wider. Will be on penalties, I'd imagine. There are some other brilliant players at Brentford. Raya's a good goalkeeper. Ben Mee, good defender. I've said before that I like Jensen in midfield. But for me, Mbeumo, I think, behind Toney, is Brentford's best player. Very talented, great left foot. I think he'll be a really important player for them this season. So for Brentford, I'm going for Bryan Mbeumo. Let's move on to Brighton. Tricky one this, because you probably would have said McAllister, he's gone. I'm tempted to say Caicedo, who currently is still there, but there's rumours he'll be moving on. If he stays this summer, then for me, he's definitely Brighton's best player. Makes things happen in midfield. Very, very important player. Take him out, I think Brighton struggle. If he goes, this is a little caveat, I would probably say Mitoma, who has been brilliant last season for them and will be an important player this season. So let's say Caicedo, but if he leaves, Mitoma for Brighton's best player. Moving on to Burnley, our first promoted team in the list. I'll happily admit right at the start, I don't know as much about the promoted teams. So I have to do a bit of research into this one. There's a few players that I do recognise from the last time Burnley were in the Premier League. Gudmundsson, who I said previously on a previous video. Josh Brownhill, who is a very good player, very consistent. But the player I'm going to pick, and he won player of the season last year, is Josh Cullen, who's a young midfielder. Looks like he is Burnley's best player, played a lot of games in the league last year, and I think he's going to be pretty pivotal to Burnley this season as well. So Burnley fans, let me know, am I right, am I wrong? But I've got Josh Cullen down as your best player so far in the squad. Let's move on to Chelsea. Bit of an easier one here. Or you say that, big turnover this summer, but I think the player I'm going to go for is someone who, on his game, when he's actually playing well, is one of the best players in England, if not the world, but struggles with injury and sometimes consistency. But I'm going to go for Chelsea's best player, Reece James. I know I said Mason Mount was their most underrated player in my last video. He's now leaving. Sounds like he is joining Man United. Reece James, though, when he's on his game, and there are some other players in there. You know, I think Chilwell's fantastic as well. Raheem Sterling, always been a big fan of him. But I think Reece James is the sort of player that even if Chelsea aren't playing well, could win them games on his own. He's so good. He is part of that crop of players that has revolutionised the right back position. So for me, Reece James is Chelsea's best player. But let me know in the comments, am I wide of the mark there? Let's move on to Crystal Palace. My team, this one's an easy one for me. Yes, we've got some great players. Elise, fantastic. Gahey and Anderson, great centre-backs. Eze, of course, is brilliant. But it has to be Wilfried Zaha. Probably the best player I've ever seen play for Palace. When you think about what he's done for us on his day, a match winner against any team in the Premier League. Yes, he's getting on a bit now. Yes, he's technically out of contract, so doesn't actually play for Palace right now. We're hoping he'll re-sign a deal, but for me, Wilf is still Palace's best player, even at the age of 30, 31, whatever he is now. If he does leave before this video goes out, or in the next few days, I'm going to say Eberechi Eze, because he's the other match winner I think we have in our squad. So Wilf or Eze for me, depending on the contract situation, as Palace's best player. Let's move on to Everton. Pretty easy one for me this. Everton in a transitional time, I would say, but their best player, most consistent, is Jordan Pickford. One of the best keepers in England. Still consistently, I think, one of the best keepers in the country, and continually wins points for Everton with his goalkeeping. They've got some other good players there. Calvert-Lewin, is excellent. But for me, Jordan Pickford, easily Everton's best player. Let's move on to Fulham. Great season for Fulham. Going to be interesting to see how they do this season. Bit of turmoil at the club in terms of Marcus Silva not signing a new deal. Some of their players like Solomon potentially leaving. For me, though, their best player, their talisman, it has to be Alexander Mitrovic. Absolute leader. Scores buckets of goals. Everyone loves him at Fulham. I can imagine he's a leader in the dressing room too. Definitely Fulham's best player. Moving on to Luton, our next promoted team, which means I had to do some research here. Player of the season was Tom Lockyer, who seems very well respected there and a very consistent player. I was going to go for him, but instead, for Luton's best player, I'm going to go for Carlton Morris, their top goal scorer. Scores a lot of goals. They're going to be expecting him to try and do the same in the Premier League this year. I think that's a really important, when you're a promoted team, scoring goals is massive, and that's a really important part of staying up. So for me, Carlton Morris, Luton's best player. Let's move on to Liverpool. For me, this is actually quite an easy one. Yes, Trent is superb. Alisson's very good. Robertson's good. Van Dijk is good. Gakpo looks decent. I know a bit of a turnover of players this summer leaving. I love Firmino, but he's gone. For me, though, it has to be Mo Salah. You just can't go. You can't look past him. One of the Premier League's best ever players. Easily Liverpool's leader on the pitch. Even when he's going through a tough spell, and so are they, he still manages to pop up with goals. For me, Liverpool's icon, Liverpool's best player is definitely Mo Salah. Let's move on to Man City. This is the hardest one because these guys have such a good crop of players. They could be best players for almost any other team in the Premier League. You have to say De Bruyne is in there. I think Rodri is fantastic. A bit of an unsung hero at Man City. Bernardo Silva continues to just produce the goods. But it has to be surely Erling Haaland. As best player, as in if you take him out of the team, they will lose bucket loads of goals. You take De Bruyne out, and yeah, he is fantastic, but there are other players in there, and there were spells last season where De Bruyne didn't play very well. Haaland, he's like a robot, continues to score goals. So for me, Haaland has to be Man City's best player. Moving on to Man United, I would say quite a few of their top players here in a similar bracket. Bruno Fernandes, very good, keeps performing and delivering. Luke Shaw, absolutely excellent as well, but for me, it's got to be Marcus Rashford. Like Bukayo Saka, a very likeable young England player. You know, a lot of people really want him to do well, certainly for England, even if you're not a Man United fan. And last season, what a run of games he went on. Can play up front, can play out wide, can play behind and number 10. Great player. For me, Man United's best player, Man United's icon and talisman. And when he plays well, so do Man United. Let's move on to Newcastle. Again, a tricky one, this one, but I think really when you think about it, there's an obvious answer, and that is Kieran Trippier. Their first big signing since getting their new money. Delivered, literally delivered with assists last season, but very consistent player. I think he leads from the back. He's an absolutely fantastic right back. Real quality player. Scores free kicks, gets assists. They've got some great players in there. Joe Linton, I think, is superb. Callum Wilson, Isaac, Nick Pope. But for me, their best players, definitely Kieran Trippier. Let's move on to Nottingham Forest. This is a difficult one because they do have 400 players in their squad, so it's difficult to whittle it down. But for me, their two best players are Brennan Johnson, and then for me, their best, Morgan Gibbs-White. Spent a lot of money on him last summer, and he was linked with Palace as well, but I think he really proved himself last season at Forest. He's a fantastic player, real match winner. Future England international for me as well, if he can be managed right. I think Morgan Gibbs-White is Forest's best player, and I think, again, this season, if he plays well, Forest will do well. I think he will be a big part of however they do this season. So, yeah, for me, Morgan Gibbs-White, Forest's best player. Let's move on to Sheffield United, our final promoted team. Again, a bit of research from me here, although quite a lot of players from last time around in the Premier League still there. I really like Oliver Norwood, think he's a very consistent midfielder, but I'm going to go with someone who I hadn't actually heard of before, but I love his journey from non-league to Sheffield United, top scorer for them last season, and that is Iliman Ndiaye. Again, I think they'll be relying on him to score goals this season. He's quite young. He's not that recently in non-league, but he's really on an upward trajectory. Played for a team called Rising Ballers, who I believe are a very sort of new non-league team. So I like that. It's part of a new crop of young players making it through in the Premier League. So Ndiaye, I'm going to say, is Sheffield United's best player. But let me know in the comments, guys. Am I wrong? Am I wide of the mark there if you're a Blades fan? Is he their best player, or is there someone else? Let's move on to Tottenham. This will be the quickest one easily on this list. It's Harry Kane by an absolute country mile. If he leaves, then we'll have to try and look at someone else. But for me, I'm not even going to mention other names. Harry Kane, easily Tottenham's best player. To West Ham, would have said Declan Rice. Obviously, it hasn't officially left yet. So let's say Declan Rice, although it sounds like he is on his way to Arsenal imminently. So in his place, I'm going to go for Jared Bowen, who is someone that keeps delivering for them in Europe, in the league last year. He's a great player, great left foot, really improved a lot since he signed for them a couple of years ago. And I think with Rice gone, there's going to be a lot on his shoulders this year. So I think Jared Bowen is West Ham's best player. And finally, let's go to Wolves. Again, some turnover there. Ruben Neves has gone. Probably would have said him. They've got some good players. Daniel Podence is there. Raul Jimenez may have said him potentially before his horrible injury a couple of years ago. But for me, I think Wolves' best player, most consistent player, wins them the most points, or certainly stops them losing the most points, is Jose Sarr. Very, very good goalkeeper, very consistent, and for me, Wolves' best player. Well, there you go. Did you agree with that? Did you disagree? Comment below. Let me know your best player for your team or the other teams. And let's get a discussion going in the comments. Join my Patreon for more football discussions and to help me generate song and sketch ideas, which we do in the Patreon Discord club. Subscribe if you're new here. Hit the bell to get notifications every time I do a new video. Like the video too. And that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll be back tomorrow with another one. Enjoying doing these daily videos. There's songs coming up as well each week. There's sketches every day. Check out my shorts for more sketches. And that's it. Take care. See you again soon.